Hello there everyone, this is Conspiracy Child, and today we will be discussing FEMA's mysteries and history. This is a rather long video, and I highly recommend going into the description to a timestamp I will provide to skip to, past the introduction and really get to the meat of this video if necessary, because this will definitely be a longer one coming from me. This video required a lot of research, so all your support is greatly appreciated. Now then, let's get on to the meat of this video. Introduction. FEMA is yet another government agency that is somewhat known throughout the U.S. for helping out during a disaster or crisis. As its name suggests, Federal Emergency Management Agency. However, many theories and suspicious acts have been committed by FEMA over the years. Its history is a tangled mess of crisscross references, locations, operations, and military bureaucracy musical chairs. Although FEMA's main purpose may seem rather clear to us today, it's gone through several name changes as well as purposes. Purposes in brief history. FEMA's purpose, as we know it today, is to be an effective manager of major emergencies within the country, including ensuring the continuity of the government during a large-scale disaster such as nuclear war, as well as providing relief to areas affected by natural disasters, as Wikipedia sums up the current purpose rather well. Harry Truman started FEMA's forerunner, the Federal Civil Defense Administration, in 1950. One newspaper columnist at the time had a succulent summation of the new agency's shortcomings. The Federal Civil Defense Administration had no authority to do anything specific or make anyone else do it. Unfortunately, it's a criticism that would continue to ring true, straight through natural disasters like Hurricane Katrina. The erratic indifference has marked nearly every aspect of the nation's homeland security operations, a point best indicated by FCDA's evolution. Over the following decades, it migrated regularly between different departments and underwent nearly a dozen name changes and agency affiliations before eventually becoming the Federal Emergency Management Agency. In the 1970s, after the 9/11 attacks, there was yet another organizational reshuffling, and the agency finally ended up part of the Department of Homeland Security in 2003. Most of these various predecessors to FEMA weren't all that concerned with civilian natural disasters. They were primarily focused on responding to nuclear war. The evolution to being the first call after a hurricane, flood, or tornado came about in part because it turned out America doesn't have all that many nuclear wars, and the equipment and supply stockpiles and disaster response experts at FEMA's predecessors were useful for something other than the apocalypse. FEMA was the result of Jimmy Carter's efforts to restore some primacy to civil defense planning, bringing it back into the spotlight after years of diminishing budgets. The administration threw its weight behind a congressional effort to reestablish what was known as the Office of Emergency Preparedness under a new name, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, uniting the nation's disaster response with its planning for a continuity of government, the secret programs that were supposed to snap into place in the event of a nuclear war. Created in April 1979, FEMA brought together more than 100 programs from across the government. Publicly, the agency would be known for coordinating the government's response to natural disasters like floods, hurricanes, and tornadoes. But a few in the public understood much of FEMA's resources went instead to its primary mission, coordinating the nation's post-apocalypse efforts, and that majority of its funding and a third of its workforce was actually hidden in the nation's classified black budget. The agency's real focus and its real budget was known to only 20 members of the Congress. Indeed, FEMA was hobbled from the start, limited by weak central leadership, full of political patrons, and pulled in multiple directions by its disparate priorities, some public, some secret. As one Reagan-era assessment of the agency concluded, FEMA may be well suffering from a case of too many missions for too few staff and resources. FEMA itself might be a mission impossible. FEMA's Mount Weather. The cornerstone of FEMA's secret world is a bunker in Virginia's Blue Ridge Mountains that has served as the civilian government's primary emergency hideaway since the 1950s. Mount Weather's name comes from its use as a research station and observatory for the Weather Bureau dating back to the 1890s. At the turn of the 20th century, the observatory was known for its pioneering science using elaborate balloons and box kites to study the atmosphere at a time when meteorology was in its infancy. The nascent Weather Bureau, the forerunner of the National Weather Service, picked the isolated site because it was far from that era's cutting-edge technology, electrical trolley lines whose troublesome electrical currents could throw off magnetic observation. We are looking to the future needs of a rapidly developing and intensely interesting branch of science, the observatory director explained, and are trying to build the very best observatory possible. Using motor-operated rotating steel drums lined with as much as 40,000 feet of piano wire, Mount Weather's kite team broke its own world altitude record in 1910, flying a kite 23,826 feet into the air and recording the lowest temperature ever, 29 degrees Fahrenheit below zero, using a kite-launched instrument. As meteorology advanced and better technologies arrived, the Weather Bureau handed off the majority of the 100-acre facility to the Army for use as a World War I era artillery range. The government then spent the better part of the 1920s trying without success to get rid of the property. Later still, beginning in 1936, Mount Weather became a Bureau of Mines facility where the agency tested various boring methods. The rock on the mountain was exceptionally dense, and the Bureau began building a narrow but lengthy tunnel into the mountain for experiments on blasting and drilling methods. During the World War II, the government housed as many as 100 conspicuous objectors there, pressing them into service as the weather researchers helped to develop better forecasts for the Northern Hemisphere. After the war, the facility went back to the Bureau of Mines, which redoubled its efforts at developing new boring techniques. In a lengthy 1953 report on the widely acclaimed problem solved by the mountain's engineers, the Interior Department bragged from Mount Weather in the last few years has come a mass of technical data on drilling steels to use in drills and rods, diamond drilling, and related subjects. Its work on the diamond drill bits was considered, well, groundbreaking. That publication was one of the last public mentions of the site for decades. Even as Interior Report went to press, the government began to slowly expunge the existence of Mount Weather from official mention. The Soviet Union now had atomic weapons. The Cold War was on, and preparations for an all-out nuclear exchange had to be made. Given its distance from Washington, its exceptionally hard rock, the pre-existing tunnel, and its pre-located boring machines, Mount Weather was a perfect place to outfit an executive branch bunker. If the worst happened, the American government could continue to function underground. Beginning in 1954, just a year after the Pentagon's backup bunker at Raven Rock became operational in Pennsylvania, the Army Corps of Engineers began a 4-year expansion project that would transform Mount Weather into the nation's largest underground complex. Operation High Point enlarged the original tunnels, excavating hundreds of thousands of tons of greenstone and hauling out a cavern large enough for a medium-sized city under the mountain. More than 21,000 iron bolts reinforced the roof. While the facility wasn't fully completed until 1958, it began serving as the executive branch's main relocation site almost immediately, hosting Eisenhower's evacuation drill Operation Alert in 1954. By the Kennedy years, Mount Weather included all the amenities and life support systems of a top-of-the-line bunker. Helicopter landing pads and a sewage treatment plant were atop the mountain, but underneath where the real facility existed, with underground reservoirs for both drinking water and cooling needs, diesel generators, a hospital, radio and television broadcast facilities, cafeterias, its own fire department and police force. Some of 800 blue mesh hammocks sat ready for evacuated personnel who would sleep in shifts throughout the day. It was just one of dozens of bunkers and relocation facilities that FEMA's predecessor agencies built around the country, including what it called Federal Regional Center bunkers, in places like Denton, Texas, Mandarin, Massachusetts, Thomasville, Georgia, Bothell, Washington, and Denver, Colorado. The Denton Center, first to open in 1964 and still in use today, was a 50,000 square foot two-level bunker that could have supported several hundred officials for 30 days. It had its own drinking well, laundry facilities, diesel generators, and 13-ton blast doors. The facility kitchen could have served 1,500 meals a day, and its walk-in freezers could double as a morgue. The centers also included duplicates of vital records to help affected agencies maintain continuity of operations. Any of the facilities could be used by the president or other high-ranking government leaders if they happened to be caught nearby during an attack, and they had broadcast booths ready to connect to the nation's emergency broadcast system. This elaborate network of national bunkers and the unique responsibilities they had in hosting U.S. officials after a nuclear attack made FEMA's predecessors in the national continuity of the government program leaders in developing field of computers and technology. By the early 1970s, Mount Weather and what was known as the Office of Emergency Preparedness had amassed some of the most sophisticated and cutting-edge computers in the world to help it respond to the complex scenarios of an unfolding attack. A large, specially built, bubble-shaped pod inside Mount Weather's east tunnel contained several advanced computers, which were disconnected from the network at 9 p.m. each night so that the teams could conduct classified research and computations until 8:30 a.m. the next day. Inside the pod, the room-sized UNIVAC 1108 supercomputer, which retailed for about 1.6 million, represented the cutting edge of technology of multi-processors, allowing the computer to do multiple functions at once. I'm at a loss to describe its maximum capacity, a UNIVAC executive said at one time, awed by the processing power installed at Mount Weather. Those computers deep down inside Mount Weather helped spawn one of modern life's most transformative technologies, Dynacorp. What is it and what does it have to do with FEMA? Allow me to sum it up rather quickly. Dynacorp is a large-scale company associated with providing certain machinery to the military as well as helping NASA with rocket designs. If that doesn't tell you what kind of corporation Dynacorp is, I don't know what will. Therefore, it's no surprise Dynacorp has been associated with FEMA as well. One particular deal they made with FEMA stood out to me during my research, as the official Dynacorp website states. Irving, Texas, August 16, 2006, Dynacorp International LLC and its partners in Partnership for Temporary Housing, PAF, have been awarded a contract by FEMA to provide temporary housing for future disaster victims. The 2-year contract has a potential value of $250 million. PAF is a limited liability corporation formed by Dynacorp International, Dewberry of Fairfax, VA, and Parsons Corporation of Pasadena, California. PAF will provide responsive, cost-effective temporary housing services to disaster victims on behalf of the Department of Homeland Security. Emergency Management Agency. PAF is one of the 6 awardees for the housing work. PAF will establish an organizational structure in Falls Church, Virginia, that will provide support with clear lines of reporting and approval and maximum integration with FEMA headquarters in Washington, D.C. The contract calls for awardees to provide personal equipment throughout FEMA's 10 regions to aid victims of both man-made and natural disasters. PAF and 5 other contract awardees must also provide subcontracting opportunities to qualified local small businesses and will be accountable to FEMA's for supervising subcontractors. Dynacorp International is currently providing temporary housing structures in Louisiana's St. Bernard Parish, which was devastated by Hurricane Katrina. Now allow me to provide a basic rundown on that snippet of text. If you couldn't read between the lines, the deal between Dynacorp and FEMA discussed PAF, a plan to provide temporary housing, and then proceeded to give a rundown on locations and cost. You could look at this with 2 perspectives, with the innocence of the government helping people or planning for something more, such as the widely spread theory of FEMA camps, which was the entire intention of making this video. Walmart ties. Many of us have heard of the rather outlandish theory of Walmarts being converted to FEMA camps, but is there any evidence to actually support this? Besides choppy footage on YouTube or spotting military trucks moving on the railway, yes, someone saw a large supply of military trucks being transported and blamed it on the conversion of Walmarts to FEMA camps. Remember the mysterious booms that plagued the internet back in 2016 and 17? Well, a rather interesting connection to them, as I've discovered in the booms, is they correlate to the construction of Walmarts. This is very interesting in the theory of FEMA camps. Perhaps all those military trucks are coming to good use being stored beneath your local Walmart, as ludicrous as that sounds. I will include an example of choppy and suspicious footage in the description of this video. Walmart ties. Many of us have heard of the rather outlandish theory of Walmarts being converted to FEMA camps, but is there any evidence to actually support this, besides choppy footage on YouTube or spotting military trucks moving on the railway? Yes, someone saw a large supply of military trucks being transported and blamed it on the conversion of Walmarts to FEMA camps. Remember the mysterious booms that plagued the internet back in 2016 and 2017? Well, a rather interesting connection to them I have discovered is the booms correlate to the construction of Walmarts. This is very interesting in the theory of FEMA camps. Perhaps all those military trucks are coming to good use being stored beneath your local Walmart, as ludicrous as that sounds. I will include an example of choppy and suspicious footage on YouTube in the description of this video. FEMA camps. Moving on to the subject of FEMA camps as a whole, there's several bits and pieces of evidence scattered about to strain through. A particular video I glanced over during my research discussed a red list and a blue list. Those listed on the blue list would be sent to camps to be re-educated and fed the lies of the system. Those on the red list would be executed. Although this piece of evidence has little to back it up, and will require an immense amount of organization by the government, which I wouldn't put past them. FEMA may actually set up a low supply at your local Walmart during times of crisis. Again, more evidence to consider here. Is there any actual FEMA camps? The answer is yes. There are several, all said to be providing temporary shelter to those in need. Quote as Mindfully, 2004, there are 800 prison camps in the United States, all fully operational and ready to receive prisoners. They are all staffed and even surrounded by full-time guards, but they are all empty. These camps are to be operated by FEMA should martial law need to be implemented in the United States, and all it would take is the presidential signature on a proclamation and the Attorney General's signature on a warrant to which a list of names is attached. FEMA is the executive arm of the coming police state and thus will head up all operations. The presidential executive orders already listed on the Federal Register also are a part of the legal framework for this operation. Quote, the camps have all railroad facilities as well as roads leading to them from the detention facilities. Many also have an airport nearby. The majority of the camps can house a population of 20,000 prisoners. Currently, the largest of these facilities is just outside of Fairbanks, Alaska. The Alaskan facility is a massive mental health facility and can hold thousands of people. Jade Helm 15. Jade Helm 15 is a joint exercise in realistic military training that was sponsored by the United States Special Operations Command and involved the United States Army Special Operations Command and Joint Special Operations Command with other U.S. military units in multiple states, including Texas, Arizona, Florida, Louisiana, Mississippi, New Mexico, and Utah. Its stated purpose was to improve the Special Operations Force's capability as part of the national security strategy. It was coordinated and led from Eglin Air Force Base, an Air Force Materiel Command base in northwest Florida. Approximately 1,200 troops were engaged over the course of the exercise. Troops engaging in the exercise assumed the roles of either occupying or resistance forces. Most locations were in sparsely populated and regions near small towns. Some participants wore civilian attire and drove civilian vehicles. Maps of the exercises included areas of the United States such as Colorado and California where no actual operations were planned. The cities in Texas include Bastrop, Smithville, Big Spring, Caddo Lake, Caldwell, Crystal, College Station, Del City, El Dorado, Goliad Junction, Leakey, Mindred, Mountain Home, San Angelo, San Antonio, and Victoria. The United States Special Operations Command claimed that the size and scope of Jade Helm sets this one apart from previous training exercises such as Darren Bridge or Robin Sage. Journalists were not allowed to be embedded in the operation, only bringing forth more suspicion. But what really inspires conspiracy theories from Jade Hell 15 is a map that was leaked out into the public. It shows a variety of hostile and permissive states. What's interesting is that Texas, a mostly Republican state, is labeled hostile, and California, a mostly Democrat state, is labeled permissive, and so on and so forth. Other states, such as Arizona and New Mexico, either lean hostile or permissive, again leaning back on the political spectrum. Many of the conspiracy theories associated with Jade Helm 15 continue as follows. Jade Helm 15 was a psychological operation aimed at getting people used to seeing military forces on the streets so that they do not realize when an invasion actually takes place. An international operation aimed to seize people's guns, recently closed Walmarts used by the military to stockpile supplies for Chinese troops who will be arriving to disarm Americans, and a military plan to round up political dissidents and remove key political figures who may be against the imposition of martial law. Other theories have described Jade Helm 15 as a secret plot to impose martial law, confiscate firearms, invade Texas, and institute population control. The conspiracy theories also include a concern about the name of the exercise, with the Jade possibly referring to China or possibly an acronym for artificial intelligence developed by the US military. Alex Jones states that the HELM is an acronym for Homeland Eradication of Militia. All these are interesting speculations to consider. Many believe that Jade Helm 15 was a dry run for the processes that will be used to force American patriots into camps. After all, it happened in World War II with Japanese Americans. What makes you think that the government wouldn't attempt such a thing again, and put in terms of the better good of America? After all, we look back at lots of acts of America we've discussed these days. What makes you think more events similar to the past won't occur? History won't repeat, yet it does. Others believe Jade Helm was a test run to prepare for an oncoming apocalypse being caused by an asteroid or nuclear war. The Jade Helm 15 military exercise had an ending date of September 15, 2015, which is the same month identified by some conspiracy theorists for the catastrophic impact of a comet or asteroid, based in part on the statement made May 13, 2014 by French Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius that the world has 500 days to avoid climate chaos. They believe that Jade Helm 15 is a dress rehearsal for the imposition of martial law which would be implemented in the event of a catastrophe of this level of severity. Sure enough, the apocalypse failed to happen that fateful day. Another interesting case having to do with Jade Helm 15 is when two FBI agents began to notice the so-called Russian disinformation campaign starting in April 2014. Apparently, these were Russian-driven efforts to spread misinformation that were involved with Jade Helm 15. In 2017, Facebook shut down a page called Heart of Texas, which was found to be associated with a Russian company promoting disinformation, including promoting that Jade Helm's conspiracy. However, this could be more dividing against the people, as Russia has been used more of a scapegoat as of late. Rex 84. We are dangerously close to a situation where if the American people took to the streets in righteous indignation, or if there was another 9/11, a mechanism for martial law could be quickly implemented and carried out under Rex 84. The Cheney/Bush administration has a plan which would accommodate the detention of a large number of American citizens during times of emergency. This plan is called Rex 84, short for Readiness Exercise 1984. The Rex 84, an undisclosed number of concentration camps, were set in operation throughout the United States for internment of dissidents and other potentially harmful to the state. Rex 84 allowed many military bases to be closed down and turned into prisons as well as mental hospitals. The Rex 84 program was originally established on the reasoning that if a mass exodus of illegal aliens crossed the Mexican/US border, they would quickly be rounded up and detained in detention centers by FEMA. This is interesting, playing into the whole Trump controversy that we face today. Existence of the Rex 84 plan was first revealed during the Iran-Cortana hearings in 1987 and subsequently reported by the Miami Herald on July 5, 1987. These camps are to be operated by FEMA should martial law need to be implemented in the United States, and all it would take is the presidential signature on a proclamation and the Attorney General's signature on a warrant with a list of names attached. Governor Tom Vilsack of Iowa called the proposal one step away from a complete takeover of the National Guard. The end of the Guard is a dual-function force that can respond to both state and national needs. The provision was tucked in the House version of the defense bill without notice to the states, something Vilsack said he resented as much as the proposal itself. Under the provision, the president would have the authority to take control of the Guard in case of a serious natural or man-made disaster, accident, or catastrophe in the United States. There are a few sub-programs that correspond with Rex 84. Operation Cable Splicer and Garden Plot are two sub-programs which will both be implemented once the Rex 84 program is initiated for its proper purpose. Garden Plot is the program to control the population. Cable Splicer is the program for an orderly takeover of the state and local governments by the federal government. In conclusion, FEMA has a strange and convoluted history littered with mysteries, most of which I left out of this video in fear that it would be never ending. There's reasons and evidence behind the majority of the points I shared today. All you have to do is a little bit of digging. As always, my videos are left up to the listener's discretion. What are your thoughts on FEMA? Did any of the evidence and government operations I discussed today sway your opinion? All in all, remember the mob at the gates they truly fear is not terrorists, but instead the people demanding the truth. This video took a lot of research and is by far one of my longest and most well-researched videos. I'll have another video up weekly soon enough. Thank you for your support, and I hope to see you again soon. As always, stay vigilant with your local vigilante conspiracy child. Bye for now. I will link my sources in the description if you are interested in such.